About 5% of California's landscape is chaparral, a dense tangle of evergreen shrubs that has evolved to withstand the state's recurring droughts and fires. The species you'll see around here include toyon, coyote brush, ceanothus, and manzanita. But the dominant chaparral shrub on Mount Diablo, and perhaps the toughest of them all, is chamise. It forms a head-high curtain that's nearly impenetrable to humans, with needle-like leaves, white flowers in springtime, and rusty seeds in the fall. Hikers may feel indifferent to its charms, until they see what happens after a fire. In the 2013 Morgan fire, chaparral vanished completely in some places. In others, shrub skeletons remained, poking their crooked arms to the sky. Whole slopes looked like a moonscape. 6 weeks later, though, green needles of chamise and other shrubs sprouted from the skeleton's bases. After some big rains a few months later, chamise also began sprouting from seeds. It popped up like crabgrass in every available space between the parent bushes. After the burn, UC Berkeley researcher Lindsey, Hendricks, Franco, and 2 collaborators gathered up handfuls of soil in burned and unburned places. She found that a single handful could contain up to 150 chamise seeds. Next, she took the seeds and soil to a greenhouse and watered them. 3 weeks later, the most severely burned soils were full of sprouts. Moderately burned soils were not quite as productive, and the unburned soil samples didn't sprout at all. Her conclusion? That chamise takes cues from fire to repopulate. Here's a photo of some chamise chaparral near Oak Knoll in December 2014, more than a year after the Morgan fire. The chaparral on the left wasn't burned. The chaparral on the right is coming back to life, and here's the same spot in 2018. The area staged a nearly complete recovery in only 5 years.
It's fun to be able to see such a rapid change. A lot of vegetation isn't quite as dramatic, right? Watching a forest grow, that's more along the lines of a 50-year process. But this is, pretty incredible.
Chamise's resilience is remarkable, but the most fascinating part of the story lies in the soil below. After a fire, chamise soils are the best place to find opportunistic plants, the ones that grow bigger and more numerous after a fire, as well as fire followers such as whispering bells, golden eardrops, and fire poppies. They're also good for bushmallow, with fuzzy gray leaves and big pink flowers.
Bushmallows are a short-lived shrub. They'll come out onto the landscape for a few decades and then slowly start to die off to where you'll only be seeing one here or there, a small grouping of them, maybe a couple decades after the fire.
Of course, some plants do better than others in the ash and char. Lindsey has found that when nitrogen levels are high in the first year after a fire, non-nitrogen fixing plants are a little more abundant in the first flush of greenery. That might be because those plants don't have to waste energy feeding the microbes in their roots to convert nitrogen from the air to a form that's usable for plants. They can just use the abundant nitrogen already provided by ash from the fire. In the second and third years, nitrogen-fixing plants are more abundant. That group includes deerweed, lupin, and buckbrush. All in all, it's a pretty neat trick. A changing parade of plants first retains and then revitalizes the soil in the chaparral community. People like Heath, Brian, and Lindsey can make good guesses about fire history by looking carefully at a patch of chamise-dominated chaparral. If the stand is almost pure head-high chamise, it probably hasn't burned in a while. If the chamise is waist-high with open patches and a mix of other shrub species that are not just on the edges of the stand, a more recent fire is likely. If there are places where those other species have taken over completely, it may be an indication of a hot spot in a recent fire, where the chamise stumps were too badly burned to sprout. In the 5th spring after the fire, Heath and Brian and I revisited their first sampling site in their study of the mountain's recovery from the Morgan fire. In the 1st spring, they'd seen only a few leaves poking up in the char. By the 2nd spring, the site was generously blanketed with whispering bells. By the 5th spring, chamise was back on its way to dominance. The chamise curtain was closing.
We're about 1 year away from not coming up here ever again. It's going to be so dense, you know? I think we're hitting our last ability to even walk through this stuff. It's getting so big.
So it's a successful recovery?
Yeah, as per usual with chaparral.
You're not surprised?
No, not at all.
It's proof of resiliency of California's fire-driven ecosystems. California is a fire-friendly place, and these plants know it, and they take advantage of it.
To get a bird's eye look at a glorious stand of chaparral, walk from Curry Point to Balancing Rock. This route is especially appealing in late spring, with fragrant sages, magenta chaparral peas, bright red manzanita berries, and some unusual flowers in the understory. Just a little beyond Balancing Rock, you can also get a look at the mountain's knobcone pines. The fact that the trees are all the same age is a legacy of the Black Hawk Fire of 1981.
If you're late in the season, like May or June, you see some nice Calochortus splendens on the way to the chaparral, which is really the star of the show. Of course, you're going to have Mount Diablo fairy lanterns out there, but you're going to have a lot of Mount Diablo manzanita, which is an endemic to Contra Costa County. It only grows at Mount Diablo and over at Black Diamond Mines, and it's really a striking manzanita because it's got grayish foliage with lobed leaves at the base, and every once in a while, if the berries are in the right condition, you can taste one and see what you think. At sometimes the year, they can be downright sweet. But then one of the other regional endemic to Mount Diablo is Diablo sunflower, which is a beautiful plant. It's true to its name. It looks like a sunflower, just a smaller version of one. It's got seeds that are about the size of a sunflower seed, but they're heart-shaped at the top. So it's kind of endearing in that way. Then there's also things like Oakland star tulip that grow around there. Those are harder to find. It's related to the Mount Diablo fairy lantern, oddly enough, because you don't think something that is a globe lily is related to a star tulip. One hangs pendant and the other one is upright with its face in the sun. They are related, and in fact, Barbara Erder showed a group of hikers one time the location where they hybridize. So you have what's normally a pink star tulip that's colored yellow like a fairy lantern. It just blew my mind. But then you get there's common stuff like the chaparral pea. If you see it at the right time of year, the magenta color is just so beautiful. Just don't touch that plant because you'll be sorry you did. It's a little bit spiky. And then just the deerweed late in the summer, California deerweed, that also pea family, just such a beautiful, brilliant yellow, and the monkey flowers, the nice rich orange color. If you got kids along, you find those monkey flowers and you touch the stigma, which is normally two-parted and open. It'll close like a pollinator has come to visit it. Sometimes you can see some red ribbon clarkia, which is a nice clarkia that's got 3 lobes on the top. It's also a nice magenta color. But you weave through the chaparral and then you get towards Balancing Rock, and then you're on a north-facing slope and you get to see some of the nice ferns of Mount Diablo and some of the shady understory plants that are just as beautiful, but I guess I'm more of a chaparral fan, so get me out in the sun where the plants are short and there's a lot of diversity, more diversity than you think.
In our next segment, we'll learn more about botanist Mary Bowerman. She not only wrote the book on the mountain's plants, she went on to politely and stubbornly ensure their protection.